So if you've gone to college in Kenya, you most likely have been to or heard about these legacy universities, which are some of the oldest and most decorated in the country. You most likely already know I'm talking about the Big Five, which have been operating, I think, since pre-independence days. Some of them are the oldest, and they're among the best colleges in Kenya too. But the problem with these universities is that they can't be able to get a grip of their finances and are literally broke from time to time. You often hear they're struggling with debt, workers are unpaid for even 6 months, and numerous other financial challenges that threaten their survival. So one wonders what really causes these problems for these institutions that are some of the largest in the country and are guaranteed to make billions each year from their students. The number one issue that causes problems for these universities is high fixed costs due to the rapid expansion that they often do without adequate funding. So if you've noticed one thing about these Kenyan universities is that they're everywhere. UN is in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, and I think it's also in Nakuru. The same thing with KU, Egerton, and Moi, which despite having very large land areas in where they are based, they often struggle to establish satellite campuses in most parts of the country. Well, this is good for the country's education sector because increases the number of people who can access higher education. The problem is that these universities often don't have the resources needed to maintain these satellite campuses independently. The satellite campuses that they end up establishing lead to major increases in fixed costs due to salaries because they have to hire workers, rent, and other infrastructure that they need to maintain a college campus. This leads to an increase in fixed costs that does not match the increase in revenues that they make from these satellite campuses. These campuses themselves are very small campuses that only take in a few students who cannot cover all the costs that they incur to operate them. So one wonders, instead of expanding this rapidly through these satellite campuses, why can these universities simply use the thousands of acres they have to center all their operations in one primary location? UN, for example, has thousands of acres in Nairobi and many campuses that it can expand to in Nairobi, but they try to establish these satellite campuses outside of the city in numerous other parts, which just leads to an increase in cost. The same, I think, with KU, Egerton, and Moi. I think Egerton has the Njoro campus has thousands of acres, but they still try to have part of the operations in other parts of the country and incur significantly higher costs than they are supposed to. The same thing with Moi University, which has a very large piece of land in cases that is off Eldoret. But they try to expand the operations to many other parts of the country and end up incurring very high costs that they cannot be able to meet from their revenues. The second reason why some of these universities keep struggling is their high student intake. So most of these Kenyan universities usually take in more students than they can manage. This also increases the need for infrastructure and increases the operating costs. So this is often the main reason why some of these universities often fail to pay their staff on time. Because if you increase the number of students at campus, you automatically have to increase the number of staff. So staffing levels end up being higher than they can manage, mainly due to the need to push more students through their system. While high student intake is also good for the country because it increases the number of people who can access higher education, it also threatens the survival of some of these legacy institutions that are some of the oldest in the country because they just end up struggling with costs, with some even having to shut down the operations temporarily for some time, as we saw I think it was in 2022, when I think it was Egerton and Moi just could not manage to cover their costs and had to suspend the operations for some time and send students home. So if I was a vice chancellor in one of these universities, the first thing I think I would do is to cut down the number of new students to manageable levels that can match the resources available. This will not only reduce costs, but it will also improve the quality of services that students are provided with. So problems like missing marks and the failure to get accommodation is often the result of overcrowding, the admission of just too many students that cannot match the resources available. If we just cut down the number of students who are admitted during one single academic year, I think the problem that most of these universities are having will be eliminated. The third reason why most of these universities are broke is fee collection challenges. So these universities struggle to collect fees even after enrolling the high number of students that they usually enroll. For parallel students, they often set high fees, very high fees, which means that the average student will not be able to pay for a full academic year upfront. They have to split their payments all through the year, sometimes making a payment when the exam is due. This has even been made worse by the recent fee increase that has seen a simple BSc or maybe an arts degree go from less than 150k a year that people used to pay back in the day to over 200k this time around. You can hear that a simple BSc degree costs 300,000 per academic year. The full degree for the 4-year program is 1.2 million. These high fees means that campuses often struggle to collect fees because very few Kenyans can just pay that 300,000 or 200,000 upfront at one go. This creates the funding challenges that they're used to and makes it difficult for them to sustain their operations that require a great deal of infrastructure to support. The fourth problem, and I think the most significant problem, is debt mismanagement and, of course, corruption. The fact that fees are not collected on time means that most of these universities have to rely on debt. They have to borrow money from financial institutions to sustain their operation. So this is not really a problem because borrowing is common in every business, except that the money they borrow is often mismanaged through corruption and white elephant projects that do not do anything to advance the cost of the universities. Corruption, I think, is so widespread in Kenyan universities that some of them are ranked as the most corrupt institutions in the country, top 10. Most of them are among the top 10 most corrupt institutions in the country. Staff often overquote the prices of inputs they have to buy and the expenses they have incurred. For example, if a department is supposed to buy a printer, they will overquote the price of the printer and the university will end up just paying for the price that they have quoted, and the internal audit department, I think, will never detect some of these things. Management also waste money on white elephant projects that do not add value to the institutions in the long term. So corruption and the failure to manage debt effectively will mean that most of these institutions will continue struggling financially for the foreseeable future unless they come up with a formula of tackling corruption, which is a very widespread problem in almost every sector in Kenya. They will continue struggling financially for the longest time. I don't see any method they can use to address this problem in the near future. The fifth problem that Kenyan universities have to deal with is the failure to have any income generating activities that can supplement the income they receive from their students. So Kenyan universities wholly rely on the fees they collect from their students to finance all of their operations. Even if they have excess funds, they don't invest in anything. They don't invest in projects that can generate income at some point in the financial year and help them cover part of their costs. This is different from foreign universities. If you are familiar with the operation of most large foreign universities, they are very big businesses that have invested heavily in numerous sectors and receive the majority of their income from even their private investments instead of relying on what they collect from their students. So Kenyan universities, I think, need to be more creative in the future and find ways of investing excess funds they receive in sectors that can generate income and help them cover part of their costs. So those are the problems that I think some of the most popular and largest universities in the country deal with financially in each academic year. Some of them I think can be solved, such as the rapid expansion and this need to just establish as many campuses as possible and take in as many students as possible, which I don't even believe is beneficial to the country because at the end of the day, most of the students, most of their graduates will just end up unemployed. So I think maybe some of them can make adjustments to how they operate and maybe cut costs. But from the look of things, operations will just continue as they have been. Other problems such as corruption, I think, are not going to be solved in the short term. So hopefully a change is made in how they operate that can reduce their costs and make them financially stable so that they can provide, I think, high quality services to the students. If not, they will continue struggling. I think at some point, even UN, which is the largest and most prestigious in the country, was struggling financially to the point that there were suggestions made that it should be sold to the private sector, which will effectively mean that the fees will be increased to very insane amount that I think the ordinary mwananchi will not be able to afford.